Hello, everybody. Today I had the privilege of talking to newly re-elected United States Representative Bruce Westerman of Arkansas, and we got to talk about his past, his present, his future, his voting record, and some things that have happened while he's been in there, in joint sessions of Congress with the president and with his peers. I hope you all enjoy his conversation and mine as much as I did. God bless you all, and thank you so much for your support. All right. So the first question I have for you is what inspired you or who inspired you to run for public office whenever you were young or growing up or
Yeah, that's an interesting question, Anthony. I tell people that I didn't really find Congress. Congress found me, and it started by running for the school board. And I kind of got talked into that or strong armed into it. People in my community wanted me to run for the school board, and I served on that. And I guess I did an okay job because a lot of people wanted me to run for the state legislature. And I went to the legislature, and uh, Tom Cotton decided to run for Senate. It opened up this House seat, and I got a lot of encouragement to run for Congress. And one day I looked up and I was sitting behind a big desk in Cannon House office building in Washington, D.C., thinking, how did this happen?
Oh,
It
wow.
wasn't like a long-term plan or something. My background is engineering and forestry, and I uh, loved the job that I had before I got into public service, but I love doing this job as well.
Absolutely. What are your most fundamental values? Because, like you said, you were kind of strong armed into politics. Was there something whenever you're coming up that really drives you every day to continue working hard?
Well, yeah, I was a kid when Ronald Reagan got elected president, and I remember, the '70s. I remember uh, the energy crisis that we had. I can vaguely remember the end of the Vietnam War. I remember the hostages in Iran, and then this guy Ronald Reagan comes on the scene, and it's like, why aren't all elected officials like this guy? He seems to know what he's talking about. He's a great communicator, and it just seemed like the world's a better place with Reagan in control. So I kind of grew up in that atmosphere and admired President Reagan with the work that he did, and went to college and studied to be an engineer and started doing engineering work, and I loved that. And then by just being prepared for opportunities that came along, I got a chance to get into public service. Uh, so I would say that if there was one public figure that inspired me, it would probably be Ronald Reagan. And I still go back and listen to his speeches on YouTube when I need a little inspiration.
Oh, wow. And whenever do you get opportunities to speak in front of all of the House of Representatives or Congress very often? Or,
Well, when you go to the floor of the House to speak, you're technically speaking in front of all of Congress, and since it's on TV and broadcast live, you're speaking to the whole world or whatever part of the world wants to listen in on it. So yeah, as a member of Congress, you always have those opportunities where you can go down and address the House.
yes, sir. How does it feel to be, isn't it humbling in a way to be from Hot Springs, go to Fountain Lake High School, and then you find yourself speaking in front of the whole world, honestly, at the House of Representatives? How is that?
It's it is very humbling, and I try not to think about that when I'm actually in the process of speaking or doing a lot of the neat stuff that congressmen get to do. But when you step back and look at it, you think this is a great country that some country kid from rural Arkansas can end up. I remember the first time I sat down in the Oval Office with the president, and I'm thinking, how did this happen? How did I get to be the person sitting in here in the Oval Office talking to the president of the United States? And still, it's almost surreal sometimes when I'm in those meetings with the president or meeting with a foreign leader or anything like that, to think that this is a great country because everybody has the opportunity to pursue these kinds of dreams.
Absolutely. And is there a certain part of the conservative mission, as you're a Republican and more of a conservative man, is there a specific part of that you're looking to continue to promote and that you see as of very high importance above the rest?
Yeah, I got to Congress and I found out that I was an odd duck in Congress from my education and experience background. I'm an engineer, and I think there's still about a dozen engineers in Congress. But I'm also a forester. I got my graduate degree in forestry, and I'm the only forester in Congress. So I serve on the Natural Resources Committee, where I get to use a lot of the stuff I learned in graduate school to apply towards policy. And because of that, and because of my conservative roots, I'm always looking at, how do conservatives view these uh, policy positions? And if you think about conservation, it's actually a derivative of the word conservative. And it was conservatives, it was Republicans, Teddy Roosevelt, the father of conservation, that actually started the conservation movement. A lot of people don't realize that it was a Republican president, Richard Nixon, that started the EPA, that signed the Clean Air Act, the Clean Water Act, and the Endangered Species Act. So Republicans have this long history in conservation. And I think when you really understand what a conservative is and what conservation is, that as Republicans and conservatives, we should really own this idea of conservation and being good stewards of what we have. There's a philosopher said that a conservative is someone who believes in unchosen obligations. Now that's kind of deep, but if you break that down and really look into it, as a conservative, I believe I have an unchosen obligation to the past because of the blessings that I enjoy today, because of the sacrifices of people who came before me, because of the work that they did. I'm able to live in this great country. So I have an obligation that I didn't necessarily choose, to stand true to the things that they established in this country. By the same token, I can look to the future and say I have an obligation to the future to leave this country in better shape than I found it. And that's exactly what stewardship and conservation is. So when we look at the natural world around us, we should think, I'm going to leave this planet to the best of my ability. I'm going to leave it in better shape than I found it for the generations ahead. And that's as conservative as anything you can do.
Absolutely. And when some people attack the conservative movement in a personal way, like when they say that you're not inclusive for being conservative or certain things like that, that attack ad hominem, like to the man, how does that make you feel? And how do you suggest that those that feel oppressed by this react to it?
Well, I think you just have to stay focused. Um, you know, one thing you learn in public service that was hard on me when I got into public service was no matter what you do, somebody's not going to like it. And if you do your public service based on trying to make everybody happy, you're going to fail at public service, and you're definitely not going to make everybody happy. I've told people before that I'm married with 4 children, and I can't always keep harmony there. So it's a moot point to think that I can keep 750,000 constituents happy all the time. But I wasn't elected to keep everybody happy. I was elected to uh, be a conservative who represented those things that we hold dear, and that I respect that oath I took to defend the Constitution. And that's what I have to do every day. And you have to make decisions that sometimes, when you cast that vote, somebody's going to be mad, and and somebody's not going to be mad. But you have to make the best decision because people have trusted me with their vote. They've trusted my judgment to cast that vote.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I wanted to follow that up with I've heard some things about how you voted against I forgot the exact name of the bill, but it has to do with discrimination in the coronavirus pandemic. And upon reading that, I noticed that the wording of it was a little vague in terms of the discrimination described. And whenever I looked at your colleagues' thoughts on it, like Representative Jim Jordan, for example, he said that it was just another attack on the president. Um, what was your reasoning for voting no on that?
Well, I'm not even sure exactly which bill you're talking about, because that's a tactic in Congress. If you're in the majority party, you can put bills on the floor, especially when you're coming up to an election season, that are going to get spun in the media to look like one thing, where in reality they're another thing. and you just have to have a strong backbone when it comes to voting on legislation like that. A lot of times bills get misnamed, and the whole purpose of that is to get people on record voting a certain way so that you can make a political issue out of it.
Yes, sir. Whenever they talk about the Chinese government, I feel like that would have been roped in with that, and it would have been made political, like you said. So I just wanted to get your take on that. And yeah, thank you for that.
Yeah, unfortunately, those kind of votes come up so often that I'm not even sure which one you're actually talking about. But that's something you have to deal with serving in Congress. It's unfortunate that we can't just look at bills on their merits and do some things that are good for the country. A lot of those bills, when they're voted on, the speaker and the majority party knows full well that with the Republican Senate, they're not going anywhere, but they'll put the bill out there to try to make talking points. Even what they call the HEROES Act, which was their version of pandemic relief. I called it the Zeros Act because it had so many zeros at the end of the number. It was several $1 trillion more of relief. So it had all those zeros, plus it didn't do a whole lot to actually address the pandemic concerns. So that's why it's important to really get into these bills and break them down and understand what it is you're voting on.
Yes, sir. I wanted to ask you because not very often people get the direct perspective on that. And of course, the media kind of has free reign at this point over what people can say or what they can't say. And I wanted to get your take next on a time where you can get roped into political things. So whenever the speaker, Nancy Pelosi, ripped up Donald Trump's speech, how did that make you feel? Was that an attack on your beliefs, or how did you feel about that?
Well, I was actually on the House floor during the State of the Union when that happened, and I couldn't see exactly what was going on when it happened. You can see it a lot better on the TV cameras, obviously. But to me, it was a total disrespect for decorum in the House. And personally, what it made me think about was how I've seen Democrats do sit-ins on the House floor and actually take their iPhones and do live streaming while they're on the House floor. I saw them do fundraisers, try to raise money while they were on the House floor. And all of this was a direct violation of House rules. It was like taking 200 and some odd years of decorum for the House and just chunking it out the window. And I saw the Sergeant of Arms just kind of turn a blind eye to it. And when I saw Pelosi rip up the State of the Union address, I thought, here we go again. And I asked the Sergeant of Arms, I said, is there not a problem with that? And he just kind of talked it away. He was making excuses for her. So, someday I would like to really clean house, get rid of a lot of the long-term House employees, the Sergeant of Arms, the parliamentarian, and all those that are entrenched there in the bureaucracy within the House, and clean house that way. And that's what I thought of when I saw Pelosi tear up the State of the Union address.
Yes, sir.
I think it would have been a totally different story had it been a Republican speaker tearing up a Democrat president's State of the Union. I think there is a double standard.
Without question. I believe that. Is that a part of do you think the swamp is still there in a way, like President Trump said, we need to drain the swamp? Is there still work left to do in regards to that? And how long do you think it would take?
Oh my goodness. The swamp is alive and well. And, DC is a different place. Pretty much if you live in DC, you're making your money off of the federal government, which means you're making your money off of the taxpayer. The cost of living there is atrocious. There's construction going on all the time. And it's just like they figured out how to feed the beast. And President Trump really shook up the system when he came in and talked about draining the swamp. And, I really hope that, or hoped that he could get a second term, and it's still not over yet as we're recording this, because I think you would really see some of the changes take place as a lot of these bureaucrats retired or quit or did something else. But no, they're entrenched very deeply there in our capital city.
Yes, sir. And in what way is the media intertwined in this? Do you believe that it's intertwined? Because we're supposed to have a free press where people should trust the media. And as a journalist, as a student journalist, I don't think it's there yet. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think there's a ways to go, Anthony. And you said something earlier about the press controlling what you say. The press has no control over what I say. What they have control over is what they broadcast that I say. So I get a lot of conservatives come to me and say, well, why aren't you all speaking up? Why aren't you calling out the Democrats? Well, I can't just call up a national TV network and say, I want to come on and make my case. And a lot of times, especially if you do a pre-recorded interview, you might talk to a reporter for 10 or 20 minutes, and then they use a 30-second, maybe even just a 10 or 15-second soundbite in what they play on TV. So I learned this in the state legislature, where you would give an interview, and as far as you knew when you gave the interview, you were just talking to that reporter about one subject, but then they would go off and interview other people, and it's like they had a script that they were going out and getting the sound bites for to put into that script to tell the story the way they wanted to tell it. So that, to me, I'm not a journalist, but I hope that's not what they're teaching in journalism school.
No. At least not in my department. Not where I'm at. Because if it was like that, I would have a problem, and that problem would be heard. So,
yeah.
So it's very important to us students right now that journalism is maintained where the person that we're interviewing dictates what is heard, not me. I'm just like the vessel that asks questions and stuff like that. And I try to keep them as fair as possible whenever I ask them. So,
well, I hope there are a lot more aspiring journalists out there like yourself, because we certainly need that. And we live in a world, with the internet and social media, and everything almost has to be in a meme or a short video, and stuff gets condensed into simple messages that make good clickbait, which is all driven by advertising. And how many people can you drive to a page or drive to a cable channel? So a lot of things get sensationalized because somebody's trying to make money off of it, and you have to look at that kind of reporting, if you want to call it reporting, in the light that it's done in. And a lot of that stuff is just motivated by generating revenue.
Mm-hmm. And for young people that want to do the right thing, like you say, to avoid the sensationalist culture, and that want to make a real difference in a way that you have as a humble man of God that wants the good of all, for the good of the climate, for the good of everything, what is your suggestion to those that feel like they're kind of going against the tide of this time?
Well, the first thing is, have some goals and don't give up on those goals. Keep working towards it. There's nothing really that's worthwhile that's not hard to obtain. So if you're going to do something to make a difference, just be prepared that it's going to take some hard work. It's going to take some disappointments along the way, but you've got to stay focused on what it is you're trying to achieve in the future, and also to be able to go to bed at night thinking you did your best job at it. And it may not change the world, but you know that you did your part to try to change the world. And maybe someday those changes that you work so hard for will make a difference. But there's only so much one individual can do anyhow. But by the same token, there's a lot that one individual can do when they're motivated and working hard and working smart towards doing those things.
Yes, sir. And you speak of things sometimes keeping you up at night in terms of what you haven't achieved. Personally, for you, what stage are you at in your American dream? And is there something that is kind of nagging at you to get accomplished, maybe in the House or maybe in the future or in your life outside of politics?
Yeah, and I go back to a story I read in high school where there was a statement in it that said, "America is not a dream; it's what we dream it to be." And what I dream about right now for America to be is a place where people have opportunities, where we've got a strong free market system, where capitalism is alive and well, where young people look to the future and think, I've got these opportunities. If I'll just work hard and do my part, I can have a rewarding life here in this country. So when you start getting more granular on that, things that I'm working on in Congress, um, healthcare is a huge issue, and I've filed this bill called the Fair Care Act of 2020. And I first filed it in 2019. I started working on it in 2017, and it's slowly gaining momentum. But someday I would like to see this type of healthcare law passed, which I think would, it's obviously a big thing that could affect the country. I've also got a bill that's closer to home in my policy expertise. It's called the Trillion Trees Act, where it's actually looking at how we take better care of our forest and how we have more forest, how we're not seeing these catastrophic wildfires every year, which are releasing thousands of tons, if not millions of tons of carbon into the atmosphere. We measure the health of the environment with two things: clean air and clean water. And a healthy forest is the link between both of those. Roosevelt called the forest the lungs of the earth because they breathe in carbon dioxide and give off oxygen. But I also like to say they're the kidneys of the earth because forested areas purify water as the rainwater falls and percolates through the soil and finds its way into the streams. So the two things that we use to measure a healthy environment, clean air and clean water, forest, are critical in that. So I would think that would be a big accomplishment if I could get the Trillion Trees Act signed into law.
Sure. And for those that live in such highly forest condensed areas, such as, we look at Arkansas and we have a lot of forest, and we never have many problems at all with wildfires or anything like that. And then we take a look at California, where there's usually a lot of burning going on. Is there anything that you could do in Congress or that they can do out in the state of California to kind of fix the problem? Because is there a difference between how the two states handle it?
Oh, there's definitely a difference. We do a lot more active management in Arkansas. We've got a lot more private land in Arkansas, although we have an abundance of public lands. There's over 2 million acres of National Forest Service land in the 4th District of Arkansas. My congressional district is 86% forested, so that's a lot of trees. But the thing about forest is that we're always managing them. We can declare something a wilderness area and say we're not going to do anything or allow any activity in this wilderness area, but we're still that's a form of management. And the reason is because forests are dynamic and they're changing all the time. And the decision to say no management is a management decision. It's something that I call action, no action. And when we choose not to manage the forest in the West, which means a human hands-off approach, we're actually saying we're going to let nature manage the forest. And nature manages with fire, with disease, and insects. So we can let that happen. That's what we're seeing happening out in the West right now. We've still got forest fires going on out there. Or we can go in and use the science that we know to take out dead trees, to thin the forest so that you don't have as much fuel, so that when you get a fire, which fire is a natural part of the ecosystem, it's going to stay down low and burn the understory and not get up in the crowns of the trees and kill everything. So we absolutely could do more out west to mitigate the severity of these forest fires.
Mm-hmm. And what is your thought on how the more liberal states are handling coronavirus in comparison with Arkansas? Do you think that there's anything that either side could do it's kind of sad that it's now a political thing, but is there something that the two sides could do to make it more efficiently dealt with?
Yeah, I think it's called get a vaccine because it. I I haven't been able to distinguish in the data from how one state's managing to another state that it's really making a lot of difference on how many cases that are out there, and we're obviously seeing a big increase in the number of cases right now, not just in the United States but around the world. So. Um, we've advanced a lot with therapeutics, with the treatments for the coronavirus, but the thing that I think we need more than anything else is a good vaccine, and it sounds like we could have that within a month or two. But the public health initiatives, it's hard to say how much they've succeeded and how much they failed. We've obviously seen a lot of people get the virus and a lot of people die from it, but we could have possibly seen a lot more people get the virus and a lot more people die from it, because where we're at right now is way below the initial projections, but it's still a very high number, and it's alarming the amount of cases that we're seeing increase each day.
Mm-hmm. And do you believe that the progression towards a vaccine, it's unprecedented historically, sometimes taking 5, 10, 15 years to get a vaccine. Now we could have one potentially within a year. That's what it's looking like. Do you think that the current leadership in place has accelerated that process?
There's no doubt that it's been accelerated. And, and I remember early on in the process, we had a meeting with all these uh, executives from pharmaceutical companies that were like pouring all their efforts into the vaccine. And that's if we get a vaccine within a year and are able to start administering that, that will definitely be one for the record books. And it just shows you the depth and the magnitude of the research in the medical profession in this country to be able to come up with something like that. Mm-hmm. And it couldn't have happened without the administration's support, without the funding we put in place from Congress, and the full court press that was put on all of it.
Yes, sir. And as if the change in leadership is true to where the Democratic Party takes the White House, what changes do you predict in the near future for the United States?
Well, a lot of it depends on the Senate, how that all happens. If if Democrats get the White House, the Senate, and the House, if they follow through with some of the things they said they're going to do, I think it could get really bad. They've said they'll do away with the cloture rule in the Senate. That would allow them to pass through whatever policy they could get out of the House. They've talked about making Puerto Rico and DC states, which would add 4 more senators and some more voting members of Congress. They've talked about packing the Supreme Court, passing things like the public option or Medicare for all. I think there would be an attack on the Second Amendment. I think there would be some laws probably passed that would put into law what the Supreme Court tried to do with Roe v. Wade. I think there's really no end to what they would possibly do if they had the House, the Senate, and the White House. I tweaked that a little bit because the numbers that we're getting back in the House looks like we could end up 214 to 221, which would be one of the tightest margins ever in the House of Representatives. And you're talking about a very small percentage of the House of the Democrats would have to, that they could lose on a vote to do something really radical. So may be able to stop some things in the House with a really tight majority for the Democrats over there, even if they did get the Senate and the White House.
Yes. How difficult is it for things that you believe in to get done, things that are more typically conservative, especially being the minority party in the chamber? Is that very difficult?
Oh, in the House, it's extremely difficult because it's straight majority rule, and our founders were really wise beyond their years, wise beyond the century that they lived in when they set up, with the Great Compromise, and they gave us a Congress that has a House of Representatives, which is a direct representation of the population of the country. Every member in the House represents roughly the same number of people across the country. It's kind of like what you would see in a parliamentary type of government. But our founders knew that there was something to all these states that we had, and we needed to give a voice to the minority. So they created the Senate, where every state gets 2 senators. They created the Electoral College. And that's something the left is attacking. And it really drives me crazy when I hear somebody in Arkansas talk about how we should do away with the cloture rule in the Senate, which takes the voice away from the minority when you do that, how we should do away with the Electoral College, which would basically relegate presidential elections to the coast, and it would give very little say to what happens in the rest of the country. Mm-hmm. So I hope we're still teaching this in public schools and universities, that there was a strong rationale and good reason for having the Senate, strong rationale and good reason for having the Electoral College. If you do away with those, you might as well go to a full parliamentary style of government, do away with the Senate, have a unicameral legislative body, and let that body elect who the leader is going to be, because that's what you're going to get if you diminish those powers that are in our Constitution.
Mm-hmm. In what way, we have seen in the election, in this election 2016, that the cities are almost completely Democratic, while the rural counties are more Republican and conservative. Is there a way to bridge? Do you have any ideas on how we could possibly bridge the gap between those differences?
Yeah, I just got the low battery.
Oh, no worries.
Yeah. So there's a lot that still brings us together in this country. But I've said for a long time, our divide in this country is getting to be more rural versus urban than any other divide that you can see. And it's like it's the rural areas that provide the necessities that the rest of the country has to have, but then we get labeled as flyover country and treated like the only thing that's important that happens on the coast or in the big cities. And I think the pandemic highlighted just how important so-called flyover country is. When we saw food shortages in the grocery stores on the coast, I think people had to start realizing that, food doesn't come from the grocery store. It comes from that flyover country that we've been neglecting all the time. So if you just get to straight, vote by numbers and majority rules, and you don't have a voice for the rural areas in this country, the cities can't survive. This country cannot survive without rural America. And they can either learn that from history, or they can, pick on rural America and find out just how important rural America is.
Is there anything that you would like to say to anyone that might be watching, maybe a student that's learning more about politics or your policies, or someone that's trying to be more informed, or to that person that lives out in rural Arkansas that's still worried about having their voice heard?
Yeah, well, I would just encourage everyone to get involved. And you don't have to serve in Congress to be involved. Serve in your church, serve with local organizations, find something you can do in your community, but have that servant's heart where you go out and work and do those things, and don't give up, because the country needs you. We need young people who are engaged. We need young people who understand the history of this country, who understand and value the importance of what was here in the past that gave us what we have today, and that understand that if you take out the foundations and you take out and destroy the Constitution that we have, then we no longer have a country. Mm-hmm. And it's going to be up to my generation to maintain that and help your generation and future generations to understand just how important that is. But it's definitely something worth fighting for. and don't think you're not making a difference when you get involved on whatever level you get involved.
Yes, sir. Well, thank you so much for all of those words, and congratulations on your reelection. I'm looking forward to seeing what happens in the Westerman Congress.
Me too. Thank you, Anthony. Have a good day.
Yes, sir. You too. Take care.